Breaking news, I've been keeping a secret, just like Brigitte Macron's pants.
Unbelievable surprise. That actually would be the least surprising thing ever. But that is not the case. It's actually much crazier. And like I said, I've been holding on to this for a very long time because something happened all the way back in February. And I was sworn to secrecy temporarily. And I feel that today is the correct day to inform audiences because it may have some severe global implications. So here is what happened, all right? The date was Monday, February 24th. And in the early evening, I had just kind of wrapped the show. It was just after 5:30 p.m., to be precise. I received a very strange message from a friend of mine. I'm not going to identify that friend, but the message specifically read, "Hey, I have something to tell you from the White House. They asked me to call you. I'm just the messenger here." Again, strange. I'm just the messenger here, like kind of removing themselves from whatever was going to be said. So I assume it's got to be something weird. And I say, yeah, whatever, give me a call. And so he does call me pretty immediately, by the way. And he says, somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron.
Now,
Like, what?
yeah. So, of course, she's done the whole Becoming Brigitte documentary series, which has been unbelievable. My wife and I have watched it. When I was on Tucker Carlson's show, I talked about it with him, how Candace Owens really led the charge on this unbelievable story about how, like, regardless of whether or not Brigitte is a woman or a man, clearly Brigitte is a man. But even if that wasn't part of it, the grooming part of it, the grooming part of the story, like grooming Emmanuel Macron when he was a young boy, young teenage boy, grooming him is the creepiest. I mean, that's not even the creepiest part. You got to watch the whole thing. But so she went incredibly deep on this story. First party sources, incredible reporting on this. So of course, Emmanuel Macron would be pissed about it. But that's the backstory.
Excuse me? I'm not kidding when I say that in the myriad of possibilities that were floating through my brain about what this phone call was going to be about, that was not one of them.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of having to redirect, and I'm going, oh, what are you talking about?
But see, you have to understand something about, like, this is the stuff that politicians pay attention. Like, this is the stuff that's whispered in the halls. Like, these are the things they're talking about. So, of course, of like all of the things you're reporting on, whether it's the big, beautiful bill or the war in Iran or any of that, the stuff that they're most concerned about hits them right in their, the whole facade, right? Their whole phony facade for many, many decades that Brigitte is somehow a woman. Like, you're hitting them right where it hurts, Candace.
To be clear, we had, ironically, as a podcast, we had just ended our Brigitte Macron series 4 days earlier on February 20th. That's when we released the last episode, which was the epilogue. So I'm going, that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting this phone call now? And obviously, I ask for a little more information. I say, who specifically called you? And that friend of mine says, it's somebody that has the president's ear. This is somebody important. So I'm thinking, okay, this is advisor, Susie Wiles, I don't know. And I tell my friend, go back to that person and just say I said no. It's free speech. This is obviously an important story to me. The implications here are pretty severe about what I've uncovered. So no deal. Hang up. I go into my husband's office and I tell him what just happened. And honestly, I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity of it because I hadn't thought beyond what may have happened. And then I do what I always do just in case. I call Noah. I call the lawyer and I'm like, hey, I know Macron's, sending us legal letters. Just want you to add this onto the pile that somebody at the White House is asking me to just stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons, somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner. And I am kind of feeling bad about my pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth. And I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been.
Pregnant attitude. I could, I have 3 kids. I know what that pregnant attitude is like. You get a pass. You get a pass.
If there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolved that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did. And not only that, before I called this individual back, when I checked online, I realized that Emmanuel Macron is in Washington, D.C., February 24th. He is in Washington, D.C.
No. Oh,
and
no.
he had departed the White House just hours before I received the call.
Oh, no.
So anyways, I am in awe. A lot of thoughts are running through my mind.
Yeah.
What could this possibly be about? And when I call that person back, they tell me something that is even stranger.
You know what's crazy is, like, this would fly in other countries, right? This would fly in the UK, censorship, with the, when 10 Downing Street calls you to tell you to stop doing something. I mean, they're all in lockstep. The media is all in cahoots, right? They have censorship laws. They'd arrest you or they'd do something else, but not in the United States. They do not like our freedom of the press. And so the French president thinks that, like, well, in our country, this would work. We would just silence a journalist like that. So sure, you can do something about it, right?
They say, look, I again am the messenger here. What I was told from somebody that's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war. Unless you stop speaking about his wife. And I'm just going, what?
What, you're going to blackmail? You're going to blackmail the president of the United States. He's holding up negotiations so people don't die. Let's be clear about that, right? You're holding up negotiations so people don't die. Sorry, you're holding up negotiations and more people will die. I guess is the right way to say it. So more people are going to die because of your vanity, because of your husband, Brigitte Macron, has a penis. Like, you're going to allow more young Ukrainians to die. You're going to allow your country to go further and further into debt because your husband has a penis.
What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I got to stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone and I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into D.C. under the guise of negotiations, the Russia and Ukraine war, and then instruct someone on his entourage to have an off-the-books discussion, a little meeting on the side, maybe somebody, again, like a Susie Wiles, where he made his truer demands? Like, hey, this is for the pictures. Me and Trump are talking about you. We're going to get it done. And then what really goes on behind the scenes is like, we're not doing anything until that little podcaster, Candace, agrees to shut her mouth. What? This is crazy. This is absolutely insane.
Right. So we'll just allow another generation of young Ukrainian men to die. I don't know if you've seen the numbers over the past few days in Ukraine. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's atrocious. And by the way, this was February that she's talking about. So since February, how many more people have died as a result? Or even in the days after? Hundreds because of your vanity?
Okay. So I say, we ended the conversation. I say, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a lot to process. I remember I get into bed and I just turn to my husband and I say, no one will ever believe us. Just something that just arrived at me very suddenly. I said, no one will ever believe that this just took place. And my husband's like, yeah, no, this is just very, very strange. And I promised the individual that I would pray on it, that I would think further about the situation. What are the implications here? And I then call him back the next day and I say, look, this is pretty weird. You have to admit this is pretty weird. and you're not really giving me any details. And I kind of want to know who specifically you spoke to, because I think it kind of matters. Is somebody trying to do a side deal while Trump is doing a different deal? And at that moment, he's honest and he says, no, President Trump was on the phone too. And I go, oh, are you kidding me? You didn't tell me this yesterday? That there was some sort of a conference call and President Trump is on the line and you didn't mention it? I go, did you lie to me yesterday? Were you trying to pretend that it was like a third party person? And he says, no, I didn't lie to you. I didn't lie to you. Like, I got a phone call and I obviously in the background, Trump communicated something to me. So he was there when the phone call took place. And I'm going, what the heck is going on? Literally, what is happening right now? So I have the phone with him. And I just say, I just need time to process what you're saying. This is so absurd. How could this become an issue that is involving the President of the United States? I'm doing a series on my podcast. And then I just kind of get into mommy mode because it's Tuesday. My daughter's got ballet. I'm at ballet with my daughter. And I get a text message from that person that says, you need to pick up the phone. Somebody from the White House is calling you. And I say, okay, it happened so quickly.
Can you imagine that this is what the White House is focused on? Like placating Emmanuel Macron? Like, this is what they're focused on? By the way, I've often certainly wanted to know, like, when J.D. Vance flew to France and he was there and meeting, he got to meet Brigitte Macron face to face. Like, one of the first questions I'd ever ask J.D. in an interview would be, could you tell that Brigitte was a man? Wonder how the rest of the interview would go.
I pick up the phone and sure enough, it is somebody at the White House that is calling me. It's not Donald Trump, but it's somebody at the White House that is calling me. That's pretty high up, close proximity to Trump. I'm not going to name. And this person just, I assume, has never even watched 1 minute of my content because, I mean, if there were a guide to how not to approach Candace Owens when you are trying to get something done, he was just following this guide. He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant. So like, you know, my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, you know, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron. It's astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. And all I was thinking in my mind before I flew into, a little rage.
My brain is going through like, who could speak that way to someone? You know, it's like who do you guys think that was? That phone call? Because like my brain is kind of going like, well, it's maybe like it sounds like a Stephen Miller kind of a move. That's kind of what it sounds like to me, but I don't know. You know, that's just what it sounds like. But
was that expression, proximity to power can lead others to diluting that they wield it. You're close to power. You think you're now Trump. You're calling me, even if you were Trump, this wouldn't be the way to speak to me. And you're calling me like that's an order from the president of the United States. So you just do it. No questions asked. Don't even think about freedom of speech. Who cares about that pesky little First Amendment? You got to just do it now. And I just basically say, look, my daughter's crying because she doesn't like when I step out of ballet, even though she can see me. She's, please, mommy, come back in. You're speaking to me inappropriately. Oh. And I just say, I don't really care I don't know who you think you're speaking to. This is not how you're going to get anything done with me. And I just hang up the phone. I'm like, this is just not a good conversation. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Goodbye. I don't like that at all.
Way to go.
And the third party person who had initially told me about the situation is trying to calm down. And he calls behind. He's like, no, I don't know why you're spoken to like that. And like, this is still really important. And this really matters to the president, and he's kind of trying to talk me off the pregnancy cliff. And I'm still calm enough that I know that pregnant Candace is not always the most rational Candace and a little bit of a hothead. And I resolve, as I'm speaking to this situation with my husband, that I should also reach out and maybe call someone who's potentially been in a predicament like this. I don't know, someone who's got a larger audience than me, and kind of call in a favor, because I don't normally text him, but I did reach out to Tucker Carlson.
I was going to say,
and I just kind of told him the situation and was like, look, this is really weird. No, I don't normally contact you for advice, but I could really use some advice right now because you know how much free speech matters to me and basically how important this particular story is to me because it involves, potentially, not just potentially, like pedophilia, incest, all of these elements. And as a mother, the idea that people this powerful, that the story could be covered, it matters. Like, this actually, the truth just matters at the end of the day. But also,
What's crazy about that, so this was February 24th, or around that time. So what's hilarious to me then is that a few weeks later, I was on Tucker's show where he brought it up and wanted to talk about Brigitte Macron, because we were talking off camera about it. So we had a conversation, and he knew. Then it was sort of like license for us to just have a conversation about it. And during that interview, we were both like, it's kind of funny because so he knows that the White House was concerned about it, and it didn't bother him. That's what I love about him, right? It's that even a few weeks after this, he knew that it was a hot button issue for the people in the White House. And he was like, F it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And then during that interview, we like praised Candace for her reporting on this story. So that's pretty remarkable. So he knew behind the scenes that this was problematic for the White House, and he was unmoved by that part of it.
like, if I could end the Ukrainian and Russian war, and by just stopping this conversation, I would do it. And he comes back with just very sage Tucker Carlson advice. And he says, look, you don't want to have the bloodshed of Christians on your conscience, but also free speech does matter. And you should essentially say you'll do it until, like you're saying, this negotiations are happening now and you'll agree to do that. But at some point, obviously, you need to inform people about what happened, because this is totally crazy. And I say that's actually a very good idea. I feel like that's a very principled position to take.
Yeah, pause. Like, all right, if the negotiation is happening this week, do I need to push out a Brigitte Macron documentary right now? Right? No, you don't. Like, if you got a call from the White House, hey, I know you're working on a story about the sex trafficking in Ukraine, like something I'm passionate about, right? All of the pedophilia and sex trafficking in Ukraine. Like, hey, Clayton, we know you're working on a story about this, et cetera, et cetera. You've done multiple pieces on it, but it's really bothering the Europeans. Can you not release the next part of your series on this for a bit, because we're really in these heated negotiations, and you know what? More people are going to die. Yeah. I would talk to Natali and I'd say, yeah, 100%. Okay. I'll wait to release my pedophilia documentary for another week or 2 or 3 weeks. Can you get this war ended, please? Yeah. And then I'll release my documentary.
Anyways, I sleep on that. Anger is subsiding. Wake up the next morning. It's February 26th. And I am sitting in the makeup chair, and I get another message that's like, hey, keep your phone on. And I'm going, I really don't want to speak to this advisor anymore. I really don't. Our personalities are not meshing. And anyways, this phone call,
I wonder who this
coming
advisor is. Again, I think it's like Stephen Miller. Kind of sounds like that, but who knows? I don't know. I'm just saying.
from Florida. I pick up the phone, and lo and behold, so here's what happened. I'm negotiating this thing. I'm negotiating Ukraine and Russia, and you wouldn't believe how many parts are part. It is President Donald J. Trump. He is calling me, and in true President Trump fashion, he jumps right into the narrative. We're not, hey, how you doing? He just like jumps right into the narrative of exactly how this went down. I am literally, it is hard to catch my breath to comprehend that 4 days ago, I'm ending a series about Brigitte Macron, and now I'm speaking to the President of the United States, and the topic of conversation, no matter which way you want to slice it, it's about Macron's wife's penis. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? And so he just jumps right into the narrative. He's like, I'm negotiating. You wouldn't believe how many pieces this person wants this person, and this person wants this, and you have no idea how much is involved when you're trying to get one of these deals done,
First of all, how I mean, I'm without words to think that Emmanuel Macron is so affected by an American journalist's documentary about his husband's penis that he would hold up peace negotiations and a peace talk between Ukraine and Russia. Like, he would use his wife's penis as leverage in war negotiations, peace negotiations. which leads me to believe that they're never really serious about ending this war anyway, as evidenced by what we've seen over the past few weeks with the NATO summit in Europe, doubling down on their war footing. So it seems like it was all theatrics from Emmanuel Macron's side anyway. Like he's going to try to use this as leverage for peace negotiations, but he has no intention of actually doing it anyway.
Anyways, I have Macron. I like Macron. We're speaking at the White House, and I'm walking him to his car. And, you know, he says to me, Mr. President, can I speak to you for a second? I say, of course you can speak to me about anything.
So wait a second. So he waits until he's like away from cameras. He's away from other like White House aides. He's just with Trump solo, away from cameras and listening devices or anything else. No reporters. And he's like walking to the car. That's when he decides to ask this question.
What's going on? And he tells me that there's Secret Service all around them. There's SUVs. They're encircled. And Macron wants to have a little sidebar. And then Macron says to him, Mr. President, do you know Candace Owens? And I say, yes, of course I know Candace Owens. What's going on? And then the president says to me, you must be a very powerful person, Candace. We're talking about the president of France taking me aside to talk about your podcast. And then he continues his narrative and he tells me that Emmanuel Macron is requesting to his face that I stop speaking about his wife. And one of the things Trump said is like, he tells me, she's old and this is really, really impacting her. And I'm listening. And he's, in one of Trump monologues, he's very funny. And then he said, I saw her, Candace, I saw her up close and she looks like a woman to me. She looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower.
Did he reach down and check her pants? Reach over, tap her leg, see if he could feel a penis under there?
And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the President of the United States about this, guys. This is crazy. This is wacky. But I'm just giving it as good as I get. I'm just trying to get him to understand the truth. And then I explained to him why I don't feel so great about this request, because that's the more important part.
I also love that she gave him some education on this, because he's not watching like independent media. He's not watching Candace's show. He's not watching my show. He's not watching Tucker's show. He's watching Fox News all day. That's what he does. So, I like that she was educating him about this entire documentary. Like, hey, all of my reporting shows that he had massive surgery to make him look like a woman.
Like, you are requesting that I really, and despite your reasoning, which is very sound, that I stop telling the truth. And I said to Trump, and I will be honest, that at that moment I realized that one day this is going to go into my autobiography. And so I got to say something funny. And I said to him, respectfully, Mr. President, it's not my fault that he married someone with a penis. He then tells me, we're really close to getting this thing done. He tells me again, Macron's been really good to me. He's been very easy to work with us. He's been a good person. He just wants me to get this one thing done.
It's all about his penis. Ending a war. It's all about Macron's penis.
And he throws in the art of the deal type stuff. He starts complimenting me. He said, Melania loves you. She says you're so beautiful. She thinks you're so beautiful. I said, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Compliments will get you everywhere in life is my mentality here. And then I say to him what I've agreed to already in the back of my head. I say, look, I'm happy to do this for the short. Obviously, I don't want to have on my conscience that less Christian men could have died in the East if I just shut up about something. But I'm very clear to him that this is going to be short term, and that I fully expect that in a few months I will be able to speak about this. And this is the point of the conversation where it actually gets quite interesting, because he says yes, and I am now adding to you what I sensed. Like, he was about to commit to that, but then it felt to me like someone in the background was like, no, we need this conversation to stop altogether. And then he doesn't say no or yes, but he just says, that he really needs to work with Macron long term, and they have this long working relationship. And I was very clear, this is not long term for me. Like, if you're close to this deal, ink it, let's get it done. And then he sort of offers at the end, he says, hey, maybe I can come on your podcast one day. I'm great for ratings. You're so Trumpian to give yourself a compliment. So I give him the Trump right back. And I say respectfully, Mr. President, I'm apparently good for ratings too, because you've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor.
Truth. Yeah, I'll come on your podcast. I'm good for ratings. Yeah, this is literally the 5th phone call I've now had from your office about my documentary. So I'm pretty damn good for ratings. Thank you, respectfully, Mr. President.
So then we end the conversation, and I am just reeling. I can't believe it's even happened. I then go and I immediately tell my husband, and I write down the details of the conversation so that I wouldn't forget the conversation that we were having. And of course, the first thing that I want to say principally is that Emmanuel Macron must step down. Okay? Because if that is true, and I will say that did not come from Trump. He did not say specifically he's holding up negotiations for this, but he did say specifically that they were talking about the Ukraine and Russia war all day, and he's just trying to make it all happen. And that is when Macron took him to the side. So I kind of trust the information who came from that third party person, that what he was being told was that he was holding this up, right? Like Macron's holding this up, a contingency here on whether or not he's going to agree to this sort of international deal is whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife. Yet you got to step down. Okay, because there is no greater example of just the lack of morality that a leader can have than his husband wife putting him on a plane and sending him overseas to make Candace Owens stop speaking about their relationship. That is like, we really all should just take a deep breath here, take a step back and recognize that he is willing to let bloodshed. He's willing to let people die.
Yes,
okay?
Exactly.
And a holdup here is going to be whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife's penis. That's ridiculous. You are not qualified to hold office. I thought that before all of this, just looking into your background. I know you're a fraud. You know you're a fraud. Your wife certainly knows that you are a fraud. But this is reaching levels where you just have to be impeached. That's absurd. That is like, let's get the impeachment trials going. And in my head, I'm thinking to Trump, actually, if you wanted to really negotiate, you could have said to him, how about I go live and tell all those reporters what you just said if you don't sign this document? That's how I would have played it. But, I was like 7 months pregnant. I would have played hardball. I don't need to have friends when we're talking about ending bloodshed.
Exactly. Get the cameras over here. Do you know what he just said to me? This little French guy? He wants Candace Owens, a reporter, to stop talking about her husband's penis. If we do that, then we can end this war. That's what this guy is. He'd be out of office immediately, locked up, thrown out. But instead, he's still there. And instead, it's now July, and this war is still going. And Ukrainian men are dying by the boatloads every day. One Ukrainian guarding 1 kilometer of land now, instead of having multiple divisions. They're decimated. So, keep it going, Macron, because your husband has a penis. Way to go, Candace. Unbelievable.